This woman really thought she could steal my land and get away with it. One day, I woke up to find part of my farm paved over. They'd simply taken my land and turned it into a community parking lot without my consent. She spent weeks ignoring me when I tried to talk things over, thinking I was just another farmer with no influence. What didn't she know? I'm the mayor of this town. Living in a small town has its advantages. The pace is calmer. Everyone knows each other and, in general, people respect each other. Well, almost everyone. Because, you see, this woman knew no boundaries. My farm has been in my family for generations. It's not just a piece of land. It's my livelihood, my home, my history. And it was always very clear that the property was not part of the luxury condominium that was built nearby. In fact, when that set of expensive houses started to appear, the residents were worried that I might sell the land to some big developer, which would change the face of the neighborhood. But I never wanted that. I just wanted to get on with my life without being disturbed. And everything was going well, until this woman came along. She was the kind of person who arrived in charge. The HOA has always had its ridiculous rules, but before she took over, they never tried to meddle in my farm. But suddenly there were suggestions that I should share my space. First, there were emails talking about how it would benefit the community if I allowed residents to use a piece of my land for parking. Then there were a few hints at condominium meetings that I should be more collaborative with the neighborhood. Collaborative. As if my farm was a community resource and not my private property. I ignored all the messages. There was no point in even wasting time discussing it. The land was mine, registered, with all the documentation up to date. There was absolutely nothing they could do to force me to make room for HOA residents. Or so I thought. I woke up early, as I always do, ready to start another day of work on the farm. But as soon as I left the house, I sensed something was wrong. There was a different smell in the air, a strong smell of freshly laid asphalt. It took my brain a few seconds to process it, but when I looked ahead, I couldn't believe my eyes. They had paved part of my land. Yes, the HOA came onto my property, without my permission, without consulting me, and turned a piece of my land into a parking lot. And it wasn't just a small piece. It wasn't a mistake or a mistake. They literally opened up a makeshift road and created a parking lot complete with marked spaces and everything. As if my farm was a shopping mall and I had authorized this nonsense. My jaw dropped. Where once there was fertile soil, now there was concrete. Where I used to store some of my farm equipment, there were now parked cars, as if my land was a public lot. The blood rose immediately. How the hell did this woman think she could do that? Who did she think she was to decide that my property was now a parking lot? I was about to march over to her house and demand an explanation, but I decided to hold in my anger. I needed to understand how far this woman was going to take this ridiculous story. More importantly, I wanted to see her face when she found out who I really was. Because one thing was certain. She had no idea that I was the mayor of this town. I was furious, but I knew that going after that woman without a plan was only going to give me a headache. She was the kind of person who loves to play the victim when things don't go her way. So instead of going to her house straight away, I decided to do something better. Get proof of everything. I took out my cell phone and started taking pictures of the absurdity. The makeshift parking lot was full of cars, as if it were something completely normal. People were coming and going as they pleased, parking as if the lot were a public space. And that's when a detail took me by surprise. There was even an official sign. It was a big, shiny, newly installed sign with the words, "Community Parking, exclusive to HOA residents." It made me laugh with pure hatred. Not only had she stolen my land, she had the nerve to put up a sign making it official. My initial plan was to control myself, gather all the evidence, and calmly take legal action. But when I saw that plaque, something in me snapped. I couldn't wait. This woman was going to have to explain to me right now what the hell she thought she was doing. I marched up to her house, not bothering to be discreet. I got to the door and knocked hard. Seconds later, she opened the door with that superior smile, thinking I was just another neighbor going to complain for some silly reason. "Ah, hello. What can I do for you?" she said, crossing her arms. I took a deep breath, trying to contain my anger. "The parking lot, on my farm. Do you want to explain to me what the hell happened there?" She blinked a few times, as if she hadn't really expected this direct approach. Then she tilted her head sideways and let out a dramatic sigh. "Oh, that? I'm glad you noticed. We finally managed to solve the problem of the lack of parking spaces in the condominium. Now everyone can park with peace of mind." She said it as if she'd just told me she'd planted flowers in my garden, as if she'd done me a favor. I crossed my arms and looked her straight in the eye. "You entered my property without permission. You paved my land without my permission. You put up a sign saying that private land is now community land. How did you think this was going to end well?" She rolled her eyes, out of patience. "Oh, please. You have so much space over there. What's a few extra spaces? It won't even make a difference to you." I laughed, not because I thought it was funny, but because the level of audacity of this woman was simply unbelievable. "You understand that this is a crime, right? You stole my property." She shrugged. "Technically, we didn't steal anything. We just reused a space that was underutilized." Underused. My land, where my family had worked for years, was just an underused space for this crazy woman. There, I realized something important. This woman really thought she was above the rules. She had played by the HOA's rules for so long that she believed her decisions were the law, that she could decide how things should work without asking anyone. But what didn't she know? This time, she'd messed with the wrong person, and I was going to make sure she learned that the hard way. I wanted to sort it out right then and there, throw that woman out, and make her undo everything she'd done on my farm immediately. But, as mayor, I learned something very valuable. Well-planned revenge is much more effective than a simple standoff. She thought she could run the town because she was used to bullying neighbors and playing the HOA rules like they were laws. But now she had crossed a line. She'd messed with someone who actually enforced the laws. And the first thing I did was pick up my phone and call a friend in the city planning department. I need an enforcement team on my farm. Now, because if there's one thing no HOA can do, it's go out paving private land without a municipal permit. While I was organizing everything, I made a point of acting as if nothing was happening. I didn't get into fights. I didn't send angry emails. I just waited, and it wasn't long before the circus caught fire. The next morning, a team from the municipality showed up at my farm. Official cars, inspectors with clipboards, and, best of all, a photographer documenting every detail of the HOA's absurd invasion. I was standing there, watching with my arms crossed, when I saw the woman coming out of her house. It wasn't until she saw the inspectors that she panicked. She ran over to where we were, with that fake smile trying to mask her desperation. "What's going on here? Why are there inspectors on his property?" The inspector, a man I'd known for years, looked at her and then at me, as if to ask silently, "Is this the crazy one?" I just nodded. He cracked a cold smile and turned to her. "We received a report of illegal construction on private property. We're here to investigate." Her face lost color. "Illegal construction? But that's just a parking lot." He jotted something down on his clipboard. "And was it duly authorized by the owner?" She tried to formulate an answer, but stammered. I decided to make it easy for her. "No, it wasn't. I never authorized anything like that." The inspectors continued their inspection. They measured the paved area, took photos, wrote down information about the sign she had the audacity to put on my land. And with each passing minute, the desperation on her face grew. Finally, the inspector put away his clipboard and announced his verdict. "This is a serious violation. The parking lot will have to be removed immediately and the area restored to its original state. In addition, there will be a fine for damage to private property and irregular construction." It was at that moment that she realized she was screwed. She tried to negotiate, said she could sort it out another way, even hinted that I could just leave it as it was and accept the situation. I just laughed. Non bother. You trespassed on my property, and now you're going to pay the consequences. The icing on the cake? In addition to the fine and the obligation to remove the parking lot, she would still have to deal with the entire HOA in revolt, because now the condominium would have to pay compensation for the damage caused. And the best part? She didn't know I was the mayor yet, but when she found out, it would be too late. It took a while for her to realize. At first, she tried to act as if she could just fix the situation, talking about appealing the decision, trying to talk some sense into the inspectors. But as they wrote everything down and the fines started to add up, the panic on her face became more and more evident. But if she thought that was the worst part, she still didn't know what was to come. After the inspection was over, I made a point of following the inspectors to the town hall to ensure that the whole process was recorded correctly. After all, as mayor, I wanted to make sure that everything was done in the most bureaucratic and annoying way possible for her. And it was there that one of the officials, who already knew about my dealings with this woman, called me over with a mischievous little smile. Do you want us to do this the traditional way, or do you want to speed up the process? The question wasn't literal, of course. The rules would be followed either way. But, as mayor, I knew exactly how things worked. And I also knew that an arrogant HOA's biggest nightmare wasn't just a fine, it was all the bureaucracy and fiscal hell I could throw at them. I grabbed the paperwork and started pulling up all the possible infractions that woman and the HOA had committed over the past few years. And, as expected, there was a lot wrong. Construction done without approval from the municipality, changes to the condominium's infrastructure without authorization, improper collection of fees, irregularities in the HOA's financial reports. This woman was leading an empire of wrongdoing, and now that I had a reason to investigate, I made sure that each of these infractions was reviewed with the highest priority. The reports were sent to the departments responsible, and in less than a week, the entire condominium was turned upside down. First came the fine notices. Residents began to receive letters from the municipality informing them that there would be a sudden increase in HOA fees due to the ongoing lawsuits. Then, the financial audit began. The municipality demanded that all of the HOA's expenses be analyzed, and, to this woman's misfortune, many of them had no clear justification. And then the residents began to wonder why, all of a sudden, there were so many extra charges and pending lawsuits. They demanded explanations from the HOA. And that's when the truth began to come out. Not only had this woman taken my property as her own, but she had also been mismanaging the HOA's money for years. And when the residents realized that she had ruined the entire HOA with her arrogant attitudes, they started to get angry. Complaints escalated, emergency meetings were called, and finally, the inevitable happened. The entire HOA collapsed. The residents, who had previously kept quiet while she called the shots, were now outraged. They had trusted this woman to run the condominium and ensure that things were within the law. But now, because of her, the whole neighborhood was sunk in fines, lawsuits, and investigations. She tried everything to hold on to her position. First, she tried to blame the HOA itself, saying that no one helped her with decisions and that the residents were ungrateful for not valuing her work. Then she tried to pin the blame on me, saying that the mayor had a personal beef with her. But the final blow came when the audit reports were released. Residents learned about all the irregularities she had committed over the years, from small illegal changes to the structure of the condominium to exorbitant spending on improvements that were never made. When the final meeting was called, the result was unanimous. She was expelled from the HOA. It was humiliating. The woman who had once paraded around the condominium like a queen was now seen as the person most responsible for the financial disaster that had befallen them all. And with no power, no allies, and completely demoralized, she made the only possible decision. She put the house up for sale and disappeared. Months later, the for sale sign finally disappeared from her house. And when I asked one of the neighbors who had bought it, he replied with a smile on his face, "Oh, nobody from the condominium. An investor bought it to renovate and resell. But you'd love to know who else is interested." And that's when he gave me the best news of the year. A local businessman wanted to buy the property to turn it into a mini market and coffee shop open to the public. In other words, the HOA's great private kingdom was about to become a place where anyone could enter, eat a sandwich, and buy groceries. The irony was so delicious that I almost couldn't believe it. This woman had spent years trying to control who could and couldn't be part of the community. Now, her old house was going to become a commercial space open to everyone. The funniest part? Some HOA residents were angry about the change, complaining that they didn't want a commercial establishment in their neighborhood. But, unluckily for them, the mayor had already approved the business license. Because, at the end of the day, I'm the boss of the city. And if you agree with me, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to leave a like, and see you in the next video.